We all saw it, right? And we all saw it happen twice.
Thank you. My heart goes out.
But what was it that we saw, according to several headlines in the mainstream media? A gesture. A hand gesture. That's all. It's kind of like calling a slur a word. While it's technically correct, you're kind of missing the main issue. Now, I worked in traditional, mainstream, legacy, whatever you want to call it, media for a long time. About 7 years in national newsrooms, to be exact. So I can explain to you why they called it a gesture and not what it obviously is, while also explaining to you why this is the entire reason I think the media is failing to meet the moment right now. See, first and foremost, I want to tell you about the fact that this hand gesture is actually being received by white nationalists, far-right extremists, and everyone kind of in that crew as exactly what it was. They're posting memes about it. I've seen them overdubbing it with audio from, the 1930s, if you catch my drift. They are critiquing his form and showing off images of themselves doing the same gesture. So how did we end up in a position where the neo-Nazis know what it was, the entire front page of Reddit knows what it was, everyone with eyeballs knows what it was, but the headlines look like this? Let me explain. One of the things that's drilled into you when you work in these newsrooms is that you shouldn't take at face value what you're seeing. It's the same reason you'll rarely see the media accuse someone of outright lying, because the word lying is a word that has intent behind it. It implies that someone said something knowing that it was dishonest. But when it comes to journalism, where you're striving to be as objective as possible and you want to fact check and verify everything before you report it, you have to be really careful saying anything that comes from a place of assuming a person's intent or what they're thinking and that you can't actually know. And that's how you end up with wordings like Elon Musk's gesture draws scrutiny. Musk responds to backlash over gesture. This one from CBC is one of my favorites, but they actually at least called it a fascist salute. They said Elon Musk accused of making what appeared to be fascist salute at Trump inaugural event. It's also why The Guardian said Elon Musk appears to make back-to-back fascist salutes at inauguration rally. Because again, without him actually telling us that that's what he intended to do, there's that wiggle room of being able to say, oh, I was just waving, which is exactly the wiggle room that Elon Musk is now playing in to try to accuse the media of being dishonest and using dirty tricks. This is why the legacy media struggles so much to cover these kinds of moments where you technically don't know the intent, and so you kind of gaslight yourself into thinking, well, I don't know for sure that I saw what I saw. But this is the part where I think the media needs to recognize the era that we're living in, which is an era where bad faith actors are media savvy. People who understand the media's borderline pathological need to both sides everything take advantage of that. They will outright tell you that you didn't see what you saw, and then the media will turn around and feel as though they have to publish it. But that can be manipulated to try to move the needle on how certain events or outrages or whatever online end up being covered. It all comes back to a model that was perfected with something called Gamergate. Basically, a bunch of nerds and incels got angry that women were making and playing and appearing in video games as more than just like a sexual object. But amid that, some guys came forward and were like, no, 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 it's not about the women, it's about ethics in video games. Which, if you look at the facts around it, it clearly wasn't. So even amid an incredibly obvious misogynistic harassment campaign, the media covered it as a debate between these two sides, the people saying it's a harassment campaign, which it was, and the ethics in gaming people. So a lot of people saw this. They saw how the headlines were more of a debate than just covering a harassment campaign, and they were like, hey, we can do that too. And unfortunately, a lot of people in journalism kind of actively scorn social media or view it as something that they don't really want to have to deal with, and so they never actually bothered to learn and how it can be weaponized. So you end up with situations where something happens. Everyone sees it happen. There is context surrounding it that makes it clear how it was received. But because of a bad faith interpretation that starts circulating, the media feels as though they have to kind of balance those perspectives. And I do understand the argument for giving people the benefit of the doubt or wording things in a way that doesn't assume their intent. But I also think that it is very interesting who the media chooses to give the benefit of the doubt to and who they choose not to give that to. And personally, I don't think that the guy who just did a very clear Yahtzee salute at a presidential inauguration party, who has billions and billions of dollars and is constantly framed in the media as being one of the smartest men in the world, needs to be characterized as someone who didn't know what he was doing. And the thing is that you don't even have to say that he definitely did this thing. I think Rolling Stone actually did a really good job of finding a way to cover this without assuming intent. Rather than focusing on the gesture itself and what Elon Musk may or may not have meant by it, their headline focused on how the extremists and Yahtzees are reacting to it. Because this makes the impact of the gesture very clear. This is the problem with the view from nowhere in journalism and trying to be completely objective. If you spend all your time desperately trying to avoid the perception of bias by balancing someone who may or may not be making an argument or a characterization of something they did in bad faith with the surrounding context of what everyone pretty much saw and knew it was and recognized it as and interpreted it as, you end up diluting the coverage of the impact of the actual issue, which should be this. So look, I am not necessarily saying that the media has to make assumptions about people's intent, but I do think that we have to interrogate who gets the benefit of the doubt and who doesn't, and ensure the context and impact of an incident is prioritized over a he said, she said, over whether they actually meant to do what they clearly did. Oh, and stop quoting the ADL, okay? Because they went all the way in the other direction and assumed his intent as being one that was not what we all saw and what it was interpreted as. Anyways, I hope that this helps you to understand how newsrooms kind of approach these issues and what kind of thinking goes into these headlines and how it can be manipulated and used by bad actors. Because heading into the next 4 years, the media either has to sort it out on this front and stop presenting both sides as equal rather than there being tons of evidence and support and clear context around one side versus like a couple people saying that what happened didn't happen. Or people are just gonna stop listening to them because there's that old saying that the job of the journalist isn't to take one person who says it's raining and one person who says it's not and then present both sides of that. Their job is to look out the window and tell you what's actually happening. But right now, the media is getting caught up in that debate between the two people instead of looking out the window. And all that's gonna do long term is make fewer people trust the media, which is a huge problem in a disinformation crisis when we need people to have reliable, trusted sources of information now more than ever. Anyways, that's just my hot take on all of this. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Let me know.
Thank you. My heart goes out.